And I feel that the next session is actually touching exactly upon what, Indra, you have highlighted. It's one of the areas where conflict is very present right now. The conflict between, let's say, paradigm, because work that we're going to explore in this next session is one of most, let's say, common human activities that we do every day, that we dedicate most of our waking life to, and which is now being at some junction point. There is a massive transformation that is happening around the paradigm of work. And this paradigm is being disrupted both by technologies, but also by recognition that we might need to discover new motivation for work, new let's say, concept of what constitute so-called decent work, as International Labour Organization calls it. What decency means in the 21st century and beyond, and what should that be related to human calling, and so on. But I would like to pass on to, this is a subject dear to me, but my also dear friend Morgan Silver-Greenberg is going to host this session. Morgan, over to you now, please.
Hi, thank you so much, Pavel. Yes, so this panel is called The Future of Thrivable Work. And as Pavel was kind of laying the groundwork, we've experienced a remarkable transformation in the 21st century in terms of how we organize and perceive work. And it's only accelerating with some of these technological forces such as AI, machine learning, augmented reality. And so when you combine these forces, these technological forces, with, I think maybe what we might want to talk about a little bit, which is how that combines with cultural and economic forces. How are we thinking about, what was these sort of traditional labor markets? How will they change? Inviting us to discover new purposes for ourselves, practices of work. And so this panel will explore the long-term evolution of what work means to us, both in terms of self-actualization and how we can benefit individuals, communities, the planet, and how we might start to shift our mindset, thinking about contribution and service and purpose. Or even as what there was a quote earlier, there's actually someone quoting Joseph Campbell about that we are looking to feel alive. And as work becomes more and more alienated from us with certain things like AI, how do we tap into the forces that are shaping our world? So I guess let's start with really brief introductions with the panelists and myself to kind of give us some context of the perspectives that we're coming from, and then we'll jump right into this conversation. So I'll start to kind of model it, and then I'll pass it over to Anton. But I'm Morgan Silver-Greenberg, co-founder of U4P with Pavel. My background's in complex systems with Stephen Wolfram. I worked at his math think tank to understand the sort of operating principles of nature. And then I worked in the space of startups, some of which became unicorns. And so that sort of capitalist mentality defined my early career. However, I've always been working in the space of trying to build things for human beings. And that kind of brings me to the work that I started with Pavel. He was on the board of a company I was with called Whittle School and Studios that was building a global education system. And in that work, I started to, I was traveling all over the world, and I started to recognize that most of the systems that govern how society operates aren't built on the principles of the thrivability of nature or the people on our planet, and that we must build with these principles of thrivability for human beings and the planet if we are to transcend our sort of problems that we're facing together. So hopefully we get into some of that. I'd like to open it up to the panelists to introduce themselves, first beginning with Anton.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Morgan. Thank you, dear panelists, dear guests. I'm Anton. I'm from an entirely different industry, from consulting. I'm heading our skilling practice sector in BCG globally. BCG is a consulting firm, and I have been very active in education space and skilling space and future of work space as a consultant for a while. In fact, my career in this particular domain started with Pavel, and I'm very, very happy and honored to be able to work with Pavel on projects still today. It's amazing to see such a distinguished panel and fantastic guests today. So very happy to be here. Thank you.
Of course. Let's go over to Bryan.
I think Bryan is not here yet because he noticed that he will come in a few minutes. So I think we can move to Michael maybe.
Okay, Michael.
Thanks, Morgan. Hi, everybody. I'm Michael Stevenson, and I lead the OECD's work on the future of education, particular emphasis on schools, younger people, despite being in some ways architects of what school is like through the PISA study. We don't shy away from the idea that things are wrong in education, and we're rethinking the purposes of education to a large extent. My background is initially in broadcasting at the BBC, thinking about how the BBC's purposes might evolve for what became the digital age. In particular, what might that mean for the unfulfilled BBC purpose of learning and education? And then I too spent my time in Silicon Valley, thinking through the potential to shift education through new generations of technology. But at the core of all of this is what's education for, and therefore, how do we think about the relationship between education and work?
Wonderful. Ela, would you like to go next?
Yeah, thank you, Morgan. I'm Ela Malhotra Gregory, and I work and weave within a learning community called Youth by Youth. And we're a community, an intergenerational global community of young people and adults reimagining education and really working to increase exponentially, because we really need it, the ability of young people to transform their education systems and therefore their work. I'm really excited by the fact that that connection has already been drawn here. And I guess for me, the most interesting part of my positionality is actually not my work. And it is the fact that when we talk about the future of work, we're talking about the entirety of my life right now. So I'm 21. I entered the workforce like more officially 3 years ago, but I've been working for the last 5 years. So yeah, when we talk about the next 50, 60 years, that's me. So I'm keen to see what's in store.
I'm keen to see what's in store as well. And so our last panelist, Kate, who it's great to see you. The last time I saw you was right before the pandemic in Paris.
Hi, Morgan. Hello, colleagues.
Hi.
It's truly a delight to see so many familiar faces and so many new ones. So I'm Kate. I'm a researcher and consultant in skills development, member of the supervisory board for Global Education Futures, one of the co-founders of Living Cities Earth. And before that, I spent 9 years with the global movement called WorldSkills International, where last 3 years I was a board member responsible for member development and strategic development. So basically within this 9 years, I explored deeply the skills development practices in our 85 member countries. So I'm fascinated on the topic of skills development and the journey, basically, which can be so different in terms of the career and skills that just making really good value for yourself and the community as a skilled professional, and how it's changing, how it's changing in different industries, in different countries. So yeah, excited to be here.
Absolutely. Well, maybe let's use that as a jumping off point to talk about, I mean, it's such a big topic, but I feel like maybe one of the things we can talk about is what are the dominant forces that we see changing work, and even a little bit based on everyone's sort of role in education as a way of building future skills, how we see those systems changing to accommodate that change. So I guess actually, Kate, let's go reverse order if you don't mind.
Sure, but what I wanted to do is I want to mention something obvious, which is definitely a commonplace. So then we can move on, to something more interesting, because basically it's hard not to mention the influence of automation, robotization, digitalization, demographic changes, demographic and social changes to the labor market. And all of these mega trends all together combined with the growing complexity and the speed of change. Then, all of this happening with the different, basically, again, it's happening faster in some places and a little slower in other places. In some occupation, let's say digitalization, let's say during the pandemic, really speed up a lot of the processes. And again, in some countries, it's more common sense to have a lot of processes digital and automated. One in some, we still can see the presence of the labor force present even in some processes where you definitely can automate it and leave human with the much more creative tasks and much more interesting tasks to accomplish. But all together, this 5-6 mega trends definitely influence labor markets everywhere. But again, this is like so common sense that this is almost not interesting to mention. This is obvious that is happening. What I would like to encourage my colleagues here in the panel, maybe mention something more interesting, which happened beyond this obvious megatrends.
How convenient.
Who would like to try to mention something more interesting than how AI is completely changing the world?
Well, okay, thanks. I'll go next, but I don't want to consign AI to the boring basket because it is incredibly important. I mean, like it or not, we still regard the purpose of education in our world as to prepare people for the jobs market. It's been that way for an awful long time. And that was consolidated in the post-war period, particularly in the USA, and everybody else followed suit. And the way we prepare people for the jobs market is to give them a grounding in school, in maths and science and critical thinking, and then we let them pursue a slightly broader curriculum when they get a little older. But what we see at the OECD, where we run the PISA study, what can 15-year-olds do around the world? What we see is that, in the global benchmark tests of reading, maths, and science, when ChatGPT-4 recently sat those tests, it got 100% in maths, 100% in science, and 100% in critical thinking and science, and 90% in maths. And it'll get 100% in maths within the next 2 or 3 months. AI is now right in our human cognitive wheelhouse. Not just doing physical tasks, not doing the clerical stuff, looking at medical and legal records. It's a problem solver, at least in the areas where we ask it to solve specific problems. Where next? Well, it still has, of course, significant limitations, but that search for integrated systems for complex problem solving is well underway. And I saw the other day a leading US review saying that by 2040, AI would be competent, perhaps at human levels, in not just critical thinking, but creative thinking, and ethical reasoning, encompassing intuition and weighing the rights of others upon us. So these are the priority skills that employers tell us will be vital over the next 20 years, and AI will have them. So I think two questions follow briefly. What does that mean for the future of work, and what does that mean for the future of education? I say briefly, but they're big questions, but I'll be brief. The future of work, if major tasks and functions, and all the major ones that we can think of, can be done by machines, does that imply that humans then withdraw from those tasks and functions? Or at least restrict themselves to kind of signing off what the machine did for them? You know, the judge who asks AI to prepare sentences on all their cases, 60 a day, and just kind of presses the button at the end of the day and says, yes, I signed them off. I think we go far too quickly to that idea that because the machine can do it, we withdraw. I think it's an unduly tailorized view of work and activity. After all, we have wheelchairs, but we continue to walk. We have Google Maps, but we don't junk our senses of direction. And I think humans will and should continue to bring human judgment and holistic judgment to all that they do in their working lives as everywhere else. You can take the AI contribution, but you evaluate it and decide what to do. The future of education, where I feel my views are broader. The rethinking of education purposes is also underway. The OECD and the high-performing systems that we're working with are quite clear that education for the labour market is, one, fueling a failed growth model that puts societies and the planet at risk. Two, driving a divisive meritocracy through academic testing and selection. And three, failing to address that palpable crisis in people's individual lives. In other words, education is looking in the wrong direction, which is why we've come to think about education for human flourishing as a purpose of education, where education offers people the chance to find their goals in life through learning. That's what learning's for, to find that purpose. And then nurtures the competencies, to use an unpleasant word, that fulfill those goals. And that's a vision of education that emphasizes above all meaning making and relationships. So far, we've talked about competencies, three of them for flourishing: adaptive problem solving, ethical decision making, and aesthetic perception. And it may be that machines will soon mimic what humans do when they solve adaptive problems, do aesthetic perception, ethically reason. But that's not the point. Our point is that these are the competencies that seem to us, amongst others, to be constitutive of a good life and to support that broader purpose of human flourishing.
Well, I love that, Michael. And thank you for kind of bringing these prompts to what is the purpose of education, specifically moving away from simply labor and into this sense of purpose and contribution. And knowing Ila's work a little bit, I'd like to invite her to comment on that.
Yeah, I'd love to. And I think, Michael, we seem to have a very aligned vision of what education could be. And I go further to, wonder what if our education systems served all of us, served the human beings on this planet, served the tree beings, served the mushroom beings, served the entire planet, and served us as communities. And for education to do that, our work needs to do that, right? We need to have, I'm really enjoying what I know some people exploring are calling a livelihoods, really thinking about what does work mean if it's regenerative. And I think that feels really important. We recognize that most young people I know right now, and I'm aware that this is also my echo chamber in the communities that I work within, but are really interested in purpose-driven work. And more than just thinking about work and a role, they're thinking about what does work mean if work is service? What does work mean if work is love? And how does this life and this body serve the planet at this complex time? And that to me is something that AI cannot replace, but actually, and this is why I think that AI conversation is really exciting, and it's something that I'm still really learning about. I think it's something that it could teach us in, because AI is simply another mode of intelligence. It's another way of sensing, another way of being, and it's how we use it. And I love James Bridle's take, amongst others, of grouping AI within that term of more than human, right? So when we think about all of the other forms of intelligence on this planet, which work is key to exploring, can we bring AI into that fold and not run from what's dark and what's terrifying? And I'm really keen to know, how do we do that together, and how do we not leave people behind in that conversation too?
Yes. One sort of clerical note that I just want to make quickly is, I noticed the chat is just filled with these, incredible thinkers and panelists on other panels. And so I just want to encourage, the chat is going to be, I'm sure that Pavel and everyone is capturing this, and is going to integrate it into some sort of a report. So I just want to encourage the chat, and I'll try to bring in some of the notes from the chat. I'm just using it as a way of quoting some of the things that have really resonated with me. So, when you said, what does work mean if work is love, right? Like, such a powerful thing to think about. So, yeah, I guess continuing on these prompts, I actually want to get Kate's take on how things have moved. Have they moved into a more interesting direction? Is there a place you want to push this? What are you thinking?
I'm also thinking that, and I want to bring this to the conversation deliberately for the future comments, that I think although the whole conference is about certain kind of futuristic view in the future thinking, I think it's still very important to not forget the things that hasn't changed. Because like so many things are changing, but so many things are actually constant. And if you read the historical books, watch the documentaries about the things and the work being done centuries ago, you suddenly see a lot of patterns which are still relevant and which educational system is still failing to train for, because there are certain stages as we develop as a professionals in any country and in any field, when we're moving from kind of finding the way to be useful for the community, to provide certain added value. Usually people say that the difference between work and hobby, that people actually willing to pay you for the work. And this is, there is a meaning in this, so you need to find your way to be useful for the community, for the society around you, to find your own place. And then basically you move to skills when you need to learn to deal with yourself, to organize yourself, to build up discipline, and to learn how to work with another human beings, and kind of every new soul need to learn it its own way again and again and again. And we fail to teach this in so many kind of levels of the educational system. And then in a certain way, kind of, you start asking the bigger question, kind of how my company or how our industry can make the better value for the society, for the economy, and so on. But you still need to go through all of these phases and many more. So I think it's definitely super interesting what we're discussing, but it's also important to know, to still remember what hasn't changed.
Anton, in terms of that transition, and in terms of sort of building these programs and building education to accommodate these changes. I'm going to just use that as a prompt to see what you think.
Yeah, sure. I might be bringing like a sort of a client perspective to this, right? As I'm advising governments and universities, schools, various projects and what they do for money. So assumingly the questions they ask of me is something that is on their minds, and I can speak from that perspective. And it's very interesting. I think everybody is lost, honestly, right? As for many perspectives, like this idea of automation has been looming over what 13, 15 years already. You know, it was not so much AI back in the days, it was more the robots, right? They were supposed to come and get our jobs. Well, they didn't, at least not yet. Now is the AI, and everybody wants to play with AI. And of course, the ChatGPT is a little bit passing still already, by the way. But still the talk of the day. So just now, a couple of hours ago, we had a pitch to a government, would say new region organized by government. There's like a cultural historic region in one of the prominent cities in the Middle East, and they are considering to launch their own university. All right, and this university, of course, needs to be super duper something like super advanced and so on, and they wanted to be considering it to be a digital first, but they still wanted to be, as they are calling this, elite. So it needs to do some research, and it needs to have world-class faculty, and it needs to have amazing students. And then this comes to a conundrum, right? Because I mean, a great university has never been and will not be for a while about ChatGPT, right? It will be about talent. It will be about an amazing team of faculty. It will be about transcending research, so a lot of motivation and inspiration, particularly in the humanities field that these guys are planning to build a university in. And then they're like, but we want everything automated and like digital first and all of that. All right. And I think there's no understanding how these things really coexist or need to coexist in the future. ChatGPT and the rest of it, they work amazing as an add-on, as something you can play as well on top of your other things that you do. But so far, I would say it's more, I do want to bring in this, note of confusion somehow among people who are really spending investment money into the topic right now. I don't know if it helps.
Yeah, and I think it does help, because I think it highlights that we're at such a transitional phase, and a phase in which we're figuring out what does purpose mean, what does the future of work look like with automation, what is the purpose of our education, and in some ways, what is the purpose of our life, right? If so much is being automated. So yeah, who wants to sort of continue on from that thread? I see both Michael and Ela shaking their heads in agreement. So
I guess maybe one interesting kind of path forward, maybe a middle way, is like we really talk a lot about a global approach. And so thinking, and when we think of digital and virtual as well, right? Like the beauty of this realm that it can bring us together through space and time to speak with one another in a way that would be very, very different if we were all traveling to one place, and would be a lot more exclusionary if we were all traveling to one place, right? And what we've noticed as a learning community that does a lot of stuff virtually is that to keep that magic of purpose and that magic of love and joy alive takes a really different outlook. And so it can't be so outcome focused and so much about doing and working and getting stuff done. The attention also has to be on how we are together, on the being. And, you know, Pavel, I felt that really in the opening with Marion leading us in a meditation yesterday and reminding us that we are connected to the trees and to the mycelium. And it feels like it's only now, and I'm seeing this in our education systems too, slowly, that focus is coming into the being and not just the doing. And that feels like a really, really important point, that really this requires something quite radical, right? That it's not about, oh, do we just automate everything, or oh, do we just keep going as we go? It's like getting right down to the bottom of why are we here, and who are we, and what are the relationships that we exist because of, and then where does education come into that, and then where does work come into that?
Yeah, I think we are playing with a kind of triangle of concepts, sort of flourishing, work, and an explosive force for automation, AI. And I think, and of course, education itself. And I think that for me, the primary question is about what education must do to enable a vision of flourishing, and then to see where work goes. I mean, I think that if education were rebalanced, it would be equipping people to develop the next generation of societal and economic and organizational models that don't deplete the planet and don't let people fall through the slats. One. Two, it would be recognizing a wider range of human capabilities than the merely cognitive with which we obsess. And three, it would be restoring a sense of meaning to people's lives. I'd like to feel that human activity, if not work, is central to all of those three purposes, and therefore is helped forward by a better approach to education. For example, I would hope that human activity and work would be shaped and itself shape that next set of social and economic and organizational models that we so desperately need. And I think if we get it right, AI will help us in each of those tasks. And if we get it wrong, it'll be destructive of the human project as a whole. But it really ought to be possible to harness AI to develop the next set of models for our world. AI, as we were saying earlier, should complement all of those major bases, be they the cognitive, the metacognitive, or the socio-cognitive. You would hope that AI, rather than deepening the crisis of meaning for us, actually clears away some of the clutter and allows us to use our leisure for better purposes. So I guess what I'm after is trying to sequence the problems, the Russian dolls, so that work isn't where we start, but work is part of a broader picture where we're thinking about how and whom we educate for flourishing in a world where AI will be much more dominant even than it is today. If we go to superintelligence, Bostrom and malign AI, all bets are off. But if we do the things we could do with education in support of flourishing, we might succeed in shaping superintelligence so that it's benign rather than malign.
I agree. I have two sort of points that I want to make and kind of push the conversation towards those points, which are very much related to what you were just saying. One is when I first got into education, something that one of my favorite facts about education is that education is a social construct, meaning that there are some autodidacts who are able to, pick up a book and learn something in isolation, but almost always the knowledge that you're picking up, the way in which you are forwarding that knowledge, and utilizing that knowledge is for social good, or is for your colleagues or with your colleagues. So that question about how do we maintain and forward this idea of community and mentorship in our education models. And then additionally, and this is where I think this is where a more optimistic lens for AI comes from me, which is what we've started to discover is that value is in natural resources, human connection. And what I mean by that is that if you look at natural ecosystems, they're the most abundant on Earth, right? Far more abundant than monoculture systems in terms of biomass that they put out. And if you look at human beings can't achieve anything without a sense of community, without a sense of purpose, without a sense of connection, without a sense of security. So how do we forward these AI systems? I believe that by understanding where value comes from, that I hope that AI systems become optimized around that value. But I guess I want to open that question up to some of the panelists. That sort of prompt. Yeah.
Because I love this piece, and it brings me to the thought of how peer-to-peer learning is globally underestimated, in most of the educational systems, companies, countries, literally everywhere. That if you think about it, that so many amazing people, amazing professionals, but the system, current working system, being almost forcefully narrowed down to the extremely tiny percentage of their actual experience, their actual capacity, and so on. You can ask somebody but who you are by your education or training, your certificate. And somebody will say, well, I don't know, I'm an accountant with a certification X. And the current system would jump into the conclusion, okay, it means that as your value to the society, you're accountant with certification X. This is how you're going to be able to find a job, in a standard way. However, the same person could be at the same time amazing cook, just amazing, who can be cooking for community potlucks for 30 years, and hundreds of people would enjoy her pies and would say that her pies are just the best pies in the whole city, but she do not have a cooking certificate. Or that at the same time, the same person can be extremely experienced social care professional because she was taking care of her elderly grandmother, and disabled brother, and so on. And she was reading all of these amazing books about this and learning learning videos on YouTube and watching documentaries because she's passionate about this field. She need to take care about the disabled person in her house. So she's actually amazing professional in this as well. But again, the current system creates, from my perspective, enormous waste, basically eliminating all of this peer-to-peer learning and all of this potential added value to the community, to the society, forcefully, trying to, as I can see here in the current labor market, sometimes trying to simplify the job for the recruiters. You need to describe yourself incredibly short and precise, and this is how you're going to be labeled. Like, I'm an MBA. Oh, good for you. Now we know how to read you, how to put you in the system. Well, 99% of the people are much more. So I think the big piece of the future of work in the 20, 30, 40, 50, gonna be all of the possible solutions who can help eliminate this waste of the incredible human capacity, then through the economy of reputation and the peer-to-peer support, and all other ways which, you know, a lot of startups developing right now to build this economy of reputation and more transparent way of the much better accreditation, so to say. You see, like, kind of, we almost do not have the proper language to speak about this, but I think my point was, I think I tried to make my point. This piece of the peer-to-peer learning and real capacity and something to be discovered for the future of work.
Yeah. Anton, I actually wanted to kind of address this to you as you work with governments and entities that are paying for you to develop educational services. And you mentioned that we're all at a loss at the moment. How do you sort of scaffold and think about helping governments get on board with a sort of new vision? Or do you think that you're more responsive to the client's demands as opposed to laying out a path forward?
Yeah, I have very mixed feelings about this, actually, because, I mean, in consulting, it is in a way easy, right? Because normally clients, they already have their ideas what they want to do, and you are helping them, right? So it's like a little bit like Kate starting today. Well, okay, well, no, someone needs to do it, so I'll just say automation. So it's a little bit like that, right? So a client comes to you, says, okay, you know what, I have an idea, this fantastic national program to stimulate employers to pay for more trainings for their workforce. And you're thinking like, wow, why exactly would you need that? I mean, aren't they supposed to, like, employers were supposed to be rational creatures, right? They were supposed to know better if they want to train someone or not. But then you have this request, you're answering this, and then in that particular example is a bit misleading, because in that particular country there was a very practical sense doing this. But I'm just basically saying that you go a little bit with what the clients are asking you to do. And what the client are asking, the reason why I have mixed feelings about that is I think most of them are off the point. And the point being the agency of people, the motivation. And most of the times the governments and institutions, they are viewing themselves as entities that will somehow decide people's fates as comes to their education or labor, whatever, employment or whatever, what have you, right? They would do these certifications for you so you can become an accountant, right? Or they would do these programs for you so you will learn to become someone, right? Or they will pay for government programs for, that do something with the working places that you are currently in. And that's great, but that's all missing the point of propelling human agency to actually take responsibility for who they are, what they want to do with their lives, what they want to learn and why, what is their purpose, and so on. I mean, I think mentioned this purpose driven work and education. Well, that's all great and fine for those who have a purpose. But most of us around, they have zero clue what the purpose is, right? And I feel strongly that if there's one point of effort that all of us, and governance including, could push, and this will change immediately. I mean, not immediately, probably over time, the reality around us, is helping people acquire this agency and know a little bit better what their purpose is and what they want to do. Because then they are much freer to do whatever. Even if there's no work, we can create work. If there's no learning, we can create learning, right? Yeah, so again, I don't know if it's helping, but this is what I'm truly feeling.
Morgan, can I chip
Absolutely,
in there?
Michael. Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, I think a flourishing view of education would absolutely say the big point is to enable everyone to find their purpose, their goal through learning. But I just wanted to go back to this question of government, because there is one that has broken away from the pack and wants to reorient its education system from education for the labor market to education for flourishing, and that is Finland. Following the last general election last March, the new government, which happens to be centre-right, said that it wanted to work towards flourishing goals for education. It did it despite, or maybe because, of the bank and other economic leaders in Finland saying, with economic projections of GDP at 1% for the next X years and 0.5% after that in Finland, what's our way to grow the economy through education? Despite that, government in Finland, with the education ministry at the fore, is going to spend 2 years figuring out what flourishing means. You could say, in an if-only way, it's a shame that it's the policymakers who'll be leading this. I mean, Anton might be implying that it'd be better if this came from beneath and flooded up through learners and teachers around the world. But the policymakers, like it or not, have got an iron grip on the conceptual education framework and have had for decades. So from my perspective, if that's the case, better that we should encourage those who can see a different future to lead it, but working with their people, their constituents, their learners, their teachers. And I hope that if Finland has broken ranks, then others will follow suit over the years ahead.
Agreed, and I love the Finnish model. I do want to actually invite Ila to comment on, because you have the government system, you sort of have this hierarchical structure, and Michael, as you mentioned, there might be a vision of how this floods up from the bottom, and I know that that's something that Ila works on. So go ahead, Ila.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what we're trying to do, right? Learner by learner, teacher by teacher, change maker by change maker, weaver by weaver, really growing this new way where actually it's not just one vision of education as well that can exist, but a plurality of them. And there's something that is so hopeful in not having to pick, right, bottom up or top down change, recognizing that maybe change can spread like a mycelial web and can come from all corners and in all ways, and knowing that we are changed by that too. But I feel like I had a bigger point now and I've lost it. And I'm aware of not wanting to just speak for the sake of speaking. So I'm going to pass it on and let you come back to me.
Okay, well, it's actually a good moment to do that. Look, we have only 5 minutes left in the session. So I thought that, we can end it in 2 ways. You can either give an invitation of something that you'd like to see or work on, or you can give a sort of summary of what you think is the most important as we think about what is the future of Thrivable work. So I guess we'll go in the same order that we joined, and that gives you a little bit of time, Ila. So Anton, please.
Morgan, can I ask you to repeat the question? I'm so sorry for that.
Oh, of course, no problem. I'm just saying we only have 5 minutes left in the session, so a sort of departing note, whether that's an invitation or a summary or a bigger question that you want to ask.
Yeah. All right. Thanks a lot. My bigger question is, if we were not doing what we're doing now, all of us, what would we doing instead? Tomorrow, just put it on pause, pack up your luggage, go somewhere, spend some vacation, think a bit, and then you want to start doing something. What this something would be? I think that's an amazingly interesting question.
Absolutely. To kind of build on that, I ran innovation at a company called Omnicom, big media conglomerate, and everyone wanted us to point to what is the new thing, right? And I would always take that back, and I'd always take innovation back to be, what are the base principles? Like, what are the base principles of what human beings need, what they want? You know, everyone at the it dates it, because this was like before influencers and before Instagram, and there was just Facebook and MySpace and things like that, and then Instagram popped up, and they would be like, oh, this is a totally new thing. I'm like, no, human beings are social beings. So, you know, that ability to connect with one another, and we're seeing how, you know, sometimes that can be irresponsibly developed, but that need to kind of come back to what are our base principles as humans, what are the operating systems that we have as humans, and that's how you really build a thrivable future. So I love that point. Michael.
Thanks. I think I'd like to shift from the word work to the word activity, which I think takes us out of, you know, the kind of capitalist model that constrains us. I think I'd like to locate that activity in a flourishing framework, rebuilding societal and economic models for a very different world that respects our planet, using the range of human capabilities and restoring free meaning to our lives. But we do need an economic framework for the human project. We need to fund the project and fund human lives. And I think, therefore, work in some sense has to stay as an enabler of a bolder future for the human race. And that's where I feel I face the Finnish bankers and look them in the eye and know that they are offering a pretty powerful challenge when they say, what are you going to do to support your flourishing future with growth rates projected at 1 or 0.5% per annum? And I don't yet have the solution to that. And I don't want to glibly suggest that AI will sort everything for us, do the work, fund the project, and let us have a ball. I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, I love that, Michael. Something I want to add to that is that maybe sometimes instead of thinking of funding, I think of energy, and sometimes instead of work, I think about the framing of contribution or value creation. And I think that those terms allow us to have a broader view of what the definitions mean. Kate.
Yeah, for me, probably the biggest the question would be, well, it's not even a question, it's a statement that I think we need to embrace complexity and stop asking ourselves questions which are exclusive. Basically saying, there was a lot of discussion in the chat about it's either about outcome or about purpose. For me, it's not either or, it has to be both, about literally everything that we discussed, because in the kind of from the multidimensional perspective, we still want our education and training system to give great practical skills. We still want that our surgeon or the nurse who is working with us, or even the bricklayer, you know, who is putting just one bricks on top of other, have the skills and be able to do this properly. But at the same time, and I saw it so many times in discussions with our amazing, what would be called in the old-fashioned way, blue collar, you know, professional from WorldSkills. They also have the kind of the deep understanding, deep meaning of the purpose of what they're doing. You know, like in this old joke, what are you doing? And one person would say, I'm just putting one brick on top of other, and another would say, I'm building cathedral, which then going to become the center of the spiritual flourishing for the whole community. So I think in literally all of the occupation, it's not either outcome or purpose. It has to be both. And we just need to create our training and learning practices, helping practitioners and learners of all ages be both good and efficient in what they're doing and understand and embrace the deep purpose, the deep meaning of what they're doing. It's not exclusive. We need to work into both directions simultaneously.
Absolutely. Ela.
Yeah, I think I'd like to end with an invitation into really embracing the identity of being a lifelong learner as well. And Kate, yeah, peer learning is super close to my heart. And just the reminder that our education is not only contained within the four walls of a school. That is our schooling. Our education is ours. It's how we live our lives. It is our work, but it's also so much more than that. So we never stop learning, and I'm excited for this conversation to continue spiraling.
Absolutely, and I think, you know, I knew this going into our hour-long session that you know, the future of Thrivable work is it is complex, and it is for us to define. And I do think that the way in which, you know, there's a comment about, you know, that we should devote more time to discussing culture, and I agree with that. I think that the interdependence between these different systems will inform one another, and I have great hope for, you know, I hope that AI understands the value of community, of ecosystems, of the value of the planet, and that, you know, as we forward that knowledge and as we sort of forge this path together, that we can do this in a way that that promotes the thrivability of both humans and the planet. So with that, I mean, I just want to thank you all, Anton, Michael, Ela, Kate. You know, this has been a true privilege to be able to do this with you. So thank you, and I'll pass it over to the organizer and heart of this whole endeavor, Pavel, my friend Pavel.
Thank you very much, Morgan, and thank you everyone for. There was one comment in the chat which says, "There's never enough time." That's what we feel. But maybe there is always enough time to sense into things and to move them. And thank you. I feel very inspired. And one of the question that was surfacing at the very end, Michael, you mentioned this, is the perspective of bankers and the perspective of funders that are asking whether that future we're discussing is viable at all. And I think that is a massive challenge that many of existing, well, let's say many of the promising projects and avenues of development are just struggling to get off the ground because they're talking about the non-existent reality. They're talking about reality in making. And we've been just discussing this possibility of transiting to a totally different way of not even work, but activities, and then in the totally different paradigm of human work and human economy and modern human economy that we've been discussing since the beginning of the day today. And now the question is whether that is viable at all. And one of, let's say, backbones of existing society and the breach between what is now and what is possible is actually finance. It's capital and it's money. So in many regards, many books and analytical papers kind of blame capital markets on perpetuating the crisis that we are now facing, an ecological crisis, crisis of injustice. At the same time, we recognize that we need to begin rethinking forms of funding and discover what is possible, what emerges. And a few years ago, I was part of the initiative, which was called Future of Capital, which was established in the UN. And Ketan Patel, who will be a speaker in the next panel, was also one of the founding members of that initiative, and then established a new initiative, which sort of gave inspiration to the name of the next panel, capital as a force of good.